Hi everyone, and welcome back to Property Podcast today. I've got Bruce Evans with me today from RentGuarantor. We're going to be talking about what that means for the industry and some of the other good things that have come up, like the AIM Stock Exchange launch and some other questions I've got. But first off, Bruce, could you tell me a little bit about your background, how you first got into the property industry, and what led you to RentGuarantor?
Okay, well, hi, first of all, Lee. I got into the industry way back in 1996 and identified that property was something that I was interested in working in. I'd been working in direct sales ahead of that. Since then, my career has taken me through various positions up to managing director at Countrywide, CEO at Lomond, and various other positions in the industry. So best part of 30 years now working predominantly on the residential letting side, but covered most other aspects of property in that time as well.
That's a pretty long, extensive time in the industry, which is a good thing. You've probably seen a lot.
Yes. Yeah, you could say that. And actually, then when change comes, you tend not to panic about it, as some people who suddenly think, oh no, this change is all going to happen and it's all going to go terribly wrong. You kind of learn that change is just constant.
It is. So what experiences shaped your perspective on the challenges faced by both the tenants and landlords?
Well, I think the point I just mentioned there, the fact that there has always been changed. I started in 96 and that was not too far after the actual last major change in the property sector, particularly in lettings, because you had the Housing Act, and I came into a market back then which included people still on old tenancies and spent a lot of time in the courts. So I learnt quite a lot about the property and the lettings market, and since then I've just seen it evolve. We had the tenant fee ban come in, and there was all doom and gloom and panic around that, and now we're seeing the renters rights bill coming in, and there's a lot of noise and panic around that. And with all of these things, I've learned that just taking a step back and looking at it and finding out what the solutions are is the best way forward, because there is a way forward, and there always is, and there's opportunities in those. So experience, I think, more than anything else, shapes my views on what's happening.
Brilliant. And look, let's talk about what we're here for, which is RentGuarantor. For the listeners who might not be familiar with what exactly what does RentGuarantor do, and what problems are you solving in the rental market?
Well, look, first off, I wouldn't be surprised if people don't know what RentGuarantor is and what a professional guarantor is, because I didn't until I happened to come across them at a stand just over 2 years ago, and bumped into one of my now colleagues and said, RentGuarantor, that's interesting, tell me about it. And it is as simple as it guarantees the rent. We act as a professional guarantor for the tenant, which then protects the landlord. There's obviously a little bit more to it, but that's the crux of it. And it's a really simple product. And in my best part of 30 years, I'd not come across many products that I thought were really good for landlords, were really good for tenants, and were really good for agents. They might tick one or two of those boxes, but not usually all three of them. And RentGuarantor did. So I sort of made further inquiries, and then, was lucky enough to join us.
And then here you are.
Yes, and here I am. Yes.
So, look, tell me a little bit how the service works for the tenant, and what reassurances does it give to landlords? So give me a little bit more about it and what the cover is and stuff like that.
Okay. So tenants renting in the UK, if they don't pass standard referencing, will require a guarantor. That has to be a UK-based guarantor. A lot of people don't have a UK-based guarantor, or would rather not put that burden of being a guarantor onto their friends or family, because it is a commitment. And they can pay for a professional guarantor, which RentGuarantor is one, and we will then act as their guarantor, so they can move ahead and rent a property. So the comfort for tenants is that they have an experienced guarantor behind them. It's a company guarantor. That's also a real benefit to landlords as well, because having an individual guarantor behind it might not mean that they can afford to pay if the tenant doesn't. Of course, we can. Our product is underwritten by insurance. We'll cover up to 12 months rent or £120,000 worth of rent, whichever one comes first. Clearly, there's not many at £120,000, but we're covered. We also cover the legal costs involved in getting a property back up to £10,000. So there's real security there for the landlord. There's security there for the tenant, because if they do fall into a situation, they can talk to us, and they can talk to us a little bit like they would talk to their friends or family, as we're the guarantor and we're trying to keep them out of getting into a real problem or a situation. Where we can, and we can come to an amicable agreement between landlord and tenant, we will do, if that just offsets the problem getting worse. So yeah, that's our product in a nutshell.
I like it. And one thing I wanted to ask while you was just explaining, so can it be, even if you're a tenant that passes all the checks, can you still use your service as a rent guarantor, or is it solely just for, is it for anybody, and so an agent could recommend it?
Yeah, anybody can come to us and ask us to be their guarantor. What we'll do is we'll also accept a lot of people who wouldn't typically get parcel referencing. So we'll take people who are self-employed. We take a lot of students, particularly international students, and that's going to become more and more relevant when the Renters' Rights Bill comes through. If, as expected, it comes through, where they're going to ban the taking of upfront rent. And that's going to be something that comes in. But yeah, we'll act for anybody. And even if somebody has a guarantor, sometimes those guarantors would rather pay for us to be the guarantor than take on that liability themselves.
I could see that. I like it, and I like that. That's what I wanted to clarify, that you can work with anybody, and the agent has the opportunity to refer your services to a tenant, to the person who's might not want to take the liability as a guarantor. They could recommend your services.
Yeah.
Okay. Recently, you launched on the AIM Stock Exchange. What sort of milestone does that mean for the business?
Look, for the business, it's important, but I think most of all, it's important for our customers, because to be listed on a stock market, you have to go through a really rigorous compliance.
You sure do.
I'm trying to think of the word, a rigorous compliance assessment, and we have to make sure that everything we do is compliant and correct. That offers comfort to any of our customers, whether you're a landlord or a tenant, because actually it's an unregulated market. And one of the things that we want to do is stand out above anybody else entering this space is we make sure we're compliant. We have things that we need to make sure that are done. So I'd say the biggest benefit to us is that.
Brilliant. And how does being listed help you scale and strengthen your offering to both the tenant and the landlords?
How would it help us scale? Well, again, that we now have agents, and don't quote me exactly on this figure, but there's almost an agent today who signs up with us, and they sign up with us because they feel comfortable with what we're doing and what we're about. So there's that side of it. On the other side of it, the AIM market is a market that is known for growth and for investment. So if we're looking for investment to expand even quicker, raise our profile even more, then AIM is a market that can really help us, and investors like it.
And okay, I wanna talk to you about the partnership you've done with Rob Rinder. How does that collaboration come about, and what role does he play in supporting Rent Guarantor in the mission?
Okay. Well, it came about, our CEO came up with the idea. I can't actually remember how he came up with the idea. I think he saw Rob speaking at an event and thought what a great brand ambassador he would be for us. And we just felt that Rob's public profile, paired with an extensive knowledge and social commentary, especially on issues relating to housing, will be a great support as we continue to drive information sharing and discussion about professional rent guarantor services and the benefits these can offer both tenants and landlords. So we just felt it was a really good fit.
Perfect. I can see, putting that together and having him on board is massive. So that's why I wanted to ask you around that, and talk to you about that part. So from the rentals reform bill and market changes, it's on everyone's radar right now. From your perspective, what are the biggest changes that tenants and landlords need to prepare for?
Well, it'll be no surprise to anybody who's involved in lettings. The biggest change is going to be the abolition of Section 21 notice, and the tenants more security in tenure, which is a good thing. And it is a really good thing. We need to be looking forward. And yes, it might cause a little bit of pain in the short term for people, but it's a really important thing that people do feel secured in their homes. What that's going to mean is that actually the referencing and putting the right tenant into a property is going to become even more important than it currently is, because you can't just serve a Section 21 notice and get somebody out. So, and that's where Rent Guarantor by default becomes even more beneficial, because having a professional guarantor just gives the landlord that security that they're going to have a good tenant, and if the tenant does fall into a situation, there's a robust company behind them to step in and pay the rent. I would point out, we were in business before the Renters' Rights Bill and Renters' Reform Bill and all the various versions of it were even out there. So we've been doing this and doing this long beforehand. It has, of course, played into our hands that we are a solution that many will need to come to.
And with the removal of the upfront rent payments, how do you see this changing the way tenancies are secured?
Well, look, it's the same answer, and this is the bit I'm referring to. We didn't set out to do this and benefit off the Renters' Rights Bill, but we will be a benefit to it. But it is a real benefit to tenants. There's a lot of tenants out there who can't find a home because their credit history is not perfect, or it does not fit in the criteria that some companies look for. So it actually just flattens that playing field for everybody, and everybody has a fair chance now of renting a property. I think more and more landlords over time will say, actually, I'd like a guarantor in place, whether it's a professional guarantor or a private guarantor. You can argue the merits and strengths. Of course, I'm going to argue the merits of a professional guarantor over a private one, but that choice, and we're really big on the word choice, the choice has to be the landlords and the tenants as to what the best solution is. All we are is offering a solution to that situation.
And do you think, I know you just said about it flattening, but do you think that it will create more opportunities for renters, or do you think it will have increased new risks for landlords?
Well, look, there's risks if you just carry on as you've been carrying on in the past, because if you're a landlord for long enough, many landlords will at some point had a problem with a tenant, if they've been a landlord for many years or have many properties. So it is about making sure that the checks are done properly beforehand. If that's the case, then there isn't really any additional risk on this side from the changes. For the tenant, once they're in, I mean, we're looking at longer tenancies. I've now seen twice this year the average tenancy is over 3 years. The intention of the Renters' Rights Bill is to allow longer term homes for tenants. They'll be moving less often anyhow, and that surely comes with less risk if they can have that stability, if they choose. I mean, the reason we have such a buoyant letting market is because actually a lot of people like the choice to be able to move, and they might move a job from London to Manchester or to Scotland, or or even overseas. So but if they want that security, then it will be there for them. And the changes that are proposed in the Renters' Rights Bill, look, there are going to be some losers, sadly. And any policy that you put in place, you cannot cover for everybody. But in this case, I think it's a pretty good starting point.
Okay. And with where you sit within the new landscape, what sort of role do you think you can play in a system that's fairer and more accessible?
Look, our role is about education and providing a service. I think there's a bigger part here where, as part of the whole industry, and we try to work with the whole industry, that there is a part of actually making sure that we do that. You're only going to be able to set the rent at one level and not take costs above it. It's not getting too greedy in some of those situations out there, that you're pricing people out of the market and only catering for those who have the larger bank balances. Saying all that, if that is the case and they want to come to us and that we think that they can afford and we'll act as their guarantor, we will do so. We can help level that playing field for some. But I think that's more of an industry overall, and our place in it is just a small part.
Bruce, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, answering my questions, explaining more to the industry about Renters' Rights Bill, where you see it and how you can help the agent, tenant and landlord. I'm very grateful, and thank you for coming on the show.
Be nice talking to you, Lee. Thank you.
Thanks Bruce.
Cheers.